Record. Okay, Boker Tov, everybody. I always want to say Shavua Tov, except we start the show on Wednesday. So Boker Tov. Anyway, Shavua Tov, what's left of it. So we are on Masechet Beitzah, Daf Yud Amud Bet. Daf Yud Amud Bet, we got up to the Mishnah. We'll begin today from the new Mishnah. We're still talking about these birds, right? These dovecotes, and again, probably not so practical nowadays that somebody will go and get one of these birds to shecht on Yom Tov, but nonetheless, the principles still apply, principles which are very relevant. And primarily, we're talking about the idea of muktzah, that as we've said many times, you need to set things aside before Yom Tov. You need to designate them. You need to perform asmana in order that they should not be muktzah. So the case with these birds is that our default position is that all the birds will be muktzah, unless a person goes and designates them before Yom Tov, specifically which birds it is that he wants that he's going to use for his meal. We saw the machloket Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel about what's involved in terms of that hazmana, the designation. Do you have to just point at them, or do you have to go and lift them up? All right, we won't repeat that. But now the Mishnah looks at this from a slightly different angle. It says as follows. So in the Mishnah, Daf Yud Amud Bet, 4 lines, 5 lines from the top. Zimen shchorim umatzah levanim. Levanim umatzah shchorim. You have different birds in the dovecote. You have black birds, you have white birds. They look different. So you came before Yom Tov. The zimen shchorim. You set aside, let's say, 2 birds that were dark in color. And you come back the next day, you come back on Yom Tov, they're not there anymore. But instead, you thought they were going to be dark birds, and they're actually white birds. Or vice versa. Levanim umatzah shchorim. Okay, another case, Shnayim umatzah shlosha. You went and you designated, there were 2 birds there, you designated them for your Simchat Yom Tov. You come back on Yom Tov, you don't see 2 birds there anymore, you see 3 birds. Okay, so in all of these cases, we say asulim. In all of these cases, it's going to be forbidden. The assumption is that the birds that you can now see are not those original birds that you had designated, and therefore they're still muktzah. However, if it's the other way around, and we'll see, it's a shlosha matzah shnayim mutarim. If you came before Yom Tov and there were 3 birds and you designated the 3 birds, and now you come back on Yom Tov and you find there's only 2 birds there, right? So this is the opposite of the previous case. We said if we designate 2, we come back and we find 3, and we'll explain in the Gemara exactly why that is. But in the case where there are 3 and you come back and there are only 2, then we say mutarim. We assume those are 2 out of the 3 that you designated, and that's fine. Betoch haken umatzah lifnei haken. Okay, so they were inside the nest, I guess, inside the area where they are, that when you came to designate them, and now you find them outside. You find them in front. Asulin. Then we say no. We say these are not the birds that you designated would have still been in the can. These must be other ones. However, im ein sham elahem elu mutarim. But if these are the only birds that are there in the vicinity, there aren't any others in this last case. So then we say that's fine, and we assume those are yours. Okay. So again, just to recap, well, what have we seen in the Mishnah? First of all, we begin 3 cases of hazmana where we say you come back. All of these cases are I designated in scenario X before Yom Tov. I come back on Yom Tov and I find scenario Y. The birds aren't exactly the same as they were before. They aren't in the same place as they were before, right? Can I still rely on that hazmana, or do I have to say these are muktzah? So the first 3 cases, we say no, we have to say they're muktzah. If you zimen shcholim matzah levanim, levanim matzah shcholim, and they're different in appearance to what we said, or shnayim matzah shlosha, or if you had designated 2 and you now find 3. Alternatively, we said shlosha matzah shnayim. If you're designated 3 and you now find 2, that's going to be mutar. If you're designated them betoch haken umatzah lifnei haken asulim. However, okay, let's have a look at Rashi. Rashi of the end of the Mishnah. He says, Zimen shcholim v'lo yasham od. Okay, our first case was where you came along and you designated these blackbirds, right? And there wasn't anything else there. You come back the next day and there's only white birds there. You have to say, in such a case, that certainly the ones that you designated have gone, they've gone somewhere else, and these are the birds that came in from somewhere. Why exactly does the Mishnah have to bring both cases, right? Zimen shcholim matzah levanim, zimen levanim matzah shcholim. We'll see, because seemingly those are exactly the same case. But the next guy says shlosha matzah. Sorry, so we said then shnayim matzah shlosha asulim. Okay, the Gemara will explain that. But then the other case that shlosha matzah shnayim mutalim. Says Rashi, hayechad alach v'shnayim nishalu. In such a case, we assume there were three to start off with. One left. He left with two. We don't say that since one is left, it must have been that all three have left. Definitely one is left, right? There were three yesterday, today there's only two. So we know one of the birds has flown away. We don't say, oh, because one flew away, the others flew away with him. No. Oh, sorry. Sorry. Just the previous. I skipped the next Rashi Dibur Matchil, but in the previous Dibur Matchil, that was our last case where he says V'chen Shnayim Umatzah Shlosha. Right. If you with me, Rashi one from where Rashi says Mishnah 1, 2, 3, 4 lines down. He says Chen Shnayim Umatzah Shlosha. Ve'enom Makil et Amuchanim. Right. You started off with two, and you now find you're designated two, and you now find three birds, and you don't recognize them. Then we say they're all forbidden. Now again, שלושה מצא שניים מותרים, אחד הלך ושניים נשארו, ולא אמריננו אלא ואחד הלך כן הלכו כולם. We don't say since one left, all the others went as well. ואלו אחרים הם, and you have to say these are other birds. No, we can still assume that these are from the original birds that were there. Then, says Rashi, זמן בתוך הקן ומצא לפני הקן, ובתוך הקן לא מצא כלום. Inside the can you don't find anything. These are going to be forbidden, and the Gemara will explain why. Okay, so Adkan, that is the Mishnah with Rashi. So now let's see the Gemara. The Gemara says, Pshita. This is obvious, right? Let's look at our first case. Our first case is certainly Zimen Shcholim Matzah Levanim, Levanim Matzah Shcholim. Again, we're not dealing with, important to mention, I think. We saw in the previous Mishnah, in the previous discussion in the Gemara, that sometimes you have to go and you have to see the birds before Yom Tov itself. Why? Because if you're pointing at them from afar, you'll think this is a fat bird and you find it's actually thin. It's not quite, meaning sometimes the birds don't look the way that you thought. This one's a bit bigger, this one's a bit smaller. When I come a bit closer to it, it looks different. So that's not what we're talking about. The Mishnah doesn't say Zimen Shmenim Umatzak Chushim or something like that. Because the person could make a mistake. Here it's something, it's not due to human error, but it's obvious that this is a different bird. You thought one was white, one was black. It's clearly not a mistake that you made. So therefore, you designated white birds, you found black, or vice versa. Says the Gemara, that's obvious. Obviously, they're not the same bird. Why do you need to tell me that? Pshita. So Amar Rabba, Hacha b'may askinan, kegon shezimen shcholim ulevanim, v'hishkim umatzah shcholim b'makom levanim, ulevanim b'makom shcholim. Okay, this also explains to us why we need two cases in the Gemara, in the Mishnah. Essentially, the Chiddush over here of Rabbi is that these are not two separate cases in our Mishnah at the beginning of Zimen Shcholim Matzah Levanim or Zimen Levanim Matzah Shcholim. We thought those were two separate cases, telling us the same thing. It says no, it's all part of one case. You have this very big dovecote. In one place, in one part of it, you have white birds, and in one part of it, you have black birds. Okay, and you come before Yom Tov, and you designate both sets of birds. Now, when you come in Yom Tov to take the birds, you find the white birds where the black birds were and the black birds where the white birds were. So here's our question. Do we say the original birds have gone and new birds came to take their place? Or do we say that they did achlafot, as they say in Hebrew, right? They switched place. So the Mishnah is saying, no, we don't say they switched place. Yeah, we're saying that it's actually different birds that came. And that is the Chiddush. That is not so pshita. So again, says the Gemara, pshita, Amar Rabba, hacha b'mayaskin. And what are we dealing with? Kegon, shezimen shcholim ulevanim. You designated both black and white birds. V'ishkimu matzah shcholim b'makom levanim ulevanim b'makom shcholim. You wake up on Yom Tov and you find, oh, where I had the black birds that I designated before, there are now white birds. And where I designated white birds, there are now black birds. So, our question is like this, Ma'od Tema. What would you have thought? You would have said, if it wasn't for the Mishnah, you would have said the following. Hane inu ninu. These are the same birds. And they just switched places. Okay? Kama shmalan, Mishnah comes to teach you that is not correct. Hanach azdu la'alma, hane achrineninu. We say the original birds have left, they've gone, they've flown away, and these are now different birds. Rashi says, כגון שתמן שחורים ולבנים, בשני קינין, וכל הקינין מובדלים במחיצות ועליות, כדרך כל השובחין עשויים עליות הרבה. וכל עלייה יש בה מחיצות הרבה. Okay, so essentially we have inside the dovecot, it's built up of different compartments. Right? He says you have two kinin, each ken is sort of like a nest, it's an area where you have the birds. וכל הקינין מובדלים במחיצות, there are walls between them, ועליות, and they're on different levels. All the dovecotes are made like this. We have different levels. We spoke previously about getting the ladder to go up, right? And every level has got many different partitions. Says Rashi, you, in this part of it, you designated black birds. There were only black birds there, and you now found white birds. And in the other one, vice versa. Okay, so that's what we say. So we say in such a case, we don't consider that they have switched around, but we consider the original birds left. These are new birds. Yeah. So now says the Gemara like this: Leima Messiah Rabbi Chanina. Let us say that this halacha is therefore supporting Rabbi Chanina's view. Rabbi Chanina, which he says in Bava Batra, says Rashi, and the discussion is this. The Amar Rabbi Chanina, Rov v'karov, halach achal halov. Okay, so now we get into a very fundamental sugya, comes up a lot in Bava Batra, comes up in other places in Shas as well. We have two concepts, concept of Rov, which is majority, and a concept of karov, which is proximity. Whenever we have a situation of something which something was lost, we find something, we don't know where it's from, we don't know where it belongs, there are different ways, there are different characteristics that we can go by to try and identify it. We don't have complete evidence, but we know, but there are two competing principles we have, which are Rov and are Karov. Now, in the absence of one of those principles, we go by Rov is a principle and Karov is a principle. The question is, when the two principles clash, which one takes precedence? Okay, and this the Gemara discusses at length. But so Rov, for example, the classic case where you find a piece of meat, without getting into all the technicalities now because it gets very technical, but you find a piece of meat. And the question is, and it's a place where there are a certain number of shops which sell kosher meat and a certain number of shops which sell non-kosher meat. Right? You see this meat and it's unidentifiable. Do we assume that it's kosher or do we assume it's non-kosher? So usually we'd go by Rov. Again, how do we, depending on where you found it and how you found it, not getting into. But that is one principle of Rov, of a majority. And there's another principle of Karov. We find something, we don't know where it belongs. We might say it goes from the closest place. So the question is, does our Gemara, the din of our Mishnah, support one of these views? I.e., Rabbi Chanina was the one who said, Rabbi Chanina, Rov Karov alach achal rov, where I have competing evidence based on the fact that it's Rov and based on the fact that it's Karov, which one takes priority? He's like, I go by Rov, I go by the principle of majority. So in our case as well, what are we saying? We're saying essentially, right, we had these birds in the dovecot. We had the two black birds and the two white birds. Okay, so if we say, what did we say? We said we don't assume that they switch places. If we went by Karov, if we say go by the birds that are closer, well, the birds that are closest are the ones that were in this ken and in that ken, and therefore that's what we would say, that they switch places. If we went by Karov, then we'd say it's not Muktzah. If, however, we go by Rov, and what's Rov? Because most of the birds in the world are Muktzah. And we're saying the birds that are there now are not necessarily the closest birds, but they come from the majority. So therefore, it sounds like we're going by Rov. Okay, Rashi says over here, Rov Karov. A case comes before us. Our question is this, for example, is this bird muktzah? Is this piece of meat kosher? Whatever it is. And you can say it's mutar or it's asur, based on proximity, based on what it's closest to. Or you could rely on the majority, but again, it's going to clash. If you're going to go by karov, you'll say it's asur, and if you go by rov, you'll say it's mutar, or vice versa. Chalof karov ve'alach harov. Okay, that's what Rabbi Hanina said. He said, forget about proximity, you go by majority. That's the overriding principle. Umaniti nami achiyama, and our Mishnah says that as well. Da'ika lemitlinu lanashchulim botam shayu etmol baken shevetzido. You could have said that these blackbirds are the ones that were in the ken that was right next to it. V'chen elevanim. And you could say they switched around. But we don't say that. We say no, they came from outside, they came from the world, they came from the Rov. Okay, so that is Adkan, the suggestion of the Gemara that we go by the opinion that this is a support, follows the opinion of Rabbi Hanina. The Gemara now rejects it. It says no, this is not necessarily, meaning we keep the same halacha, we keep the same conclusion, but it's not necessarily a proof for Rov over Karov. Why? Kidamar Abaye, we have to say like Abaye said, bedaf. Hachanami bedaf. In other words, later on we will see, okay, on the next daf, we'll see that Abaye says we're dealing with the case, the way the dovecot was, that there is a daf, there is a board, sort of a wooden board that is protruding from outside, and that is where the birds come to rest. Kedamar Abaye lekaman says Rashi bedaf. Sheyesh daf lifnei hashovach. There is this protruding ledge outside the shovach. Bolet v'yotzei mimeno. V'sham ba'im v'yoshvim yonin. This is where birds come and they sit there. Deme'alma. Tadil shi'leim lekanes laken. The birds that come from outside, they will be afraid to go inside the ken. Neshotan shebaken megalshim et hakol et kol haba alein. The birds inside the ken are xenophobic. They aren't right. Other birds come along and they'll push them away. They'll scare them out. So they sit outside. And when those birds leave the shavach, that's when they come inside. So maybe they came from this daf. In other words, since you have the stuff over there and there are birds that are coming there all the time, that are going to be right outside, so those birds are close as well. Those birds are close as well. So you have the birds that are coming from the rov that are also karov in this case. In other words, and therefore you go by, in this case, you go by rov, because essentially the principle of karov does not really apply in our case. Karov could also be from the rov. It's not just those birds that were in the next door ken, the white or the black ones that we said, but because you have the staff, because you have this place outside the nest where birds are coming all the time, so those could be karov as well. Therefore, maskana is that there is no proof this way that rov takes precedence over karov. Okay, the next case we had in the Mishnah was zimen shnayim umatzah shlosha asulim. You set aside, you designated two, and then you found the next day you came and you found there were three birds there. So that's going to be forbidden. Why? Why don't we say there were two and now there are three? So at least two of them, or maybe one of them, is from the original birds that we designated. Says the Gemara, "May nafshach." We have our may nafshach. Okay, there are two possibilities here. I designated two birds. I now found three birds. So either those are three new birds, or you might still have the two original birds there, but you have one new bird as well, meaning one of them has to be a bird that I did not designate. So either I say they're all different birds, okay, and if they're different birds, they're different birds. In other words, they're all muktzeh. Okay, and if they are not different birds, well, then one of them's a new one. So one of them is mixed in, and therefore I have to assume that they're all muktzeh. Right, because one of them, I have no way of knowing which one, so then I would have to say that they're all muktzeh, and therefore either way, it's going to be asur. Now, the next case in the Mishnah was the opposite, where we said it's mutar. Shlosha u'matzah shnayim mutarim. You designated three birds, and you now come back and you find two. So, Maitama, what is the reason for this? Hane in huninu v'chad minayu azila alm. We assume that these two birds are from the original trio of birds that we had. One of the birds is left, but the other two are still here. So the Gemara is now going to take this to a place we have a machloket between Rabbi and Rabbanan when it comes to Maser Sheni. I'm going to ask if our din regarding the birds is related to and is based on one of the opinions when it comes to Maser Sheni. Essentially, the question here is going to be, when I have something which I leave behind, I designate or I set, and then I come back and I find less than what was there originally. Do I say, this is our question in our Mishnah, do I say that what's there is left over from what was there originally? Or do I say, since it's a different amount, what was there originally is gone and it's now something else, right? That was the case with our birds. We had 3 birds to start off with. We come back and we find there are 2 birds. Do we say all 3 birds have gone and 2 new birds have come in? Our Mishnah did not say that. Our Mishnah said we started off with 3. One of them is left, but we've still got 2. 2 of the 3 are still there. So you'll see this is very similar to a machloket that we have here between Rabbi and Chachamim. So the Gemara originally puts it like this. It says, Leima manit in Rabbi. Let us assume that our Mishnah follows the opinion of Rabbi. Why? V'lo Rabbanan. Titania. Here's the Beitzah. Hiniach maneh umatzah matayim. Hiniach maneh umatzah matayim. Chulin u'maaser sheni moravin ze bazeh. Divrei Rabbi. V'chachamim omrim hakol chulin. הניח 200 ומצא מנה, מנה מונח ומנה מותר דברי רבי, וחכמים אומרים הכל חולין. Okay, so this is a bright that goes like this. We have a case of Maser Sheni. Maser Sheni, we remember it comes up many times in Jas. Maser Sheni is when we take from the agricultural produce. We set aside Trumot and Masrot. We set aside Trumah Gdolah, which goes to the Kohen. We have Maser Rishon, which goes to the Levi, and he has to separate Trumat Maser from that as well. And then we have either Maser Sheni or Maser Ani, depending on the year in the Shemitah cycle. The 7th year, the Shemitah, that is Kedushat Shvit, that is Hefker Lakol, and there are no tithes have to be taken. But in the 3rd and 6th year, we have Maser Ani, which is the 2nd tithe, which is taken off and given to the poor. And in the 1st, 2nd, 4th, and 5th year, we have Maser Sheni. By the way, it can get a bit complicated sometimes to work out. So generally speaking, if you buy fruits and vegetables from a shop that has a hechsher, which you should, so then they separate Trumot and Masrot for you. The Rabbanut takes care of that. You don't have to worry. But if you have your own farm, or sometimes you go somewhere, if you're volunteering in one of these places and you're picking oranges at the moment or whatever it is, and then you've just picked them, you have to separate Trumot and Masrot, and you have to work out which year of the cycle we're in. So you might say, okay, so what are we in now? We're in the Shemitah, what was it, 2 years ago? So we're in the 2nd year or the 3rd year. I don't remember. Okay, not so simple. Not as simple as that, because we know what year is kover when it comes to Trumot and Masrot depends on different parameters. For grains, it is when it reaches 1/3 of its ripeness. For vegetables are the easiest. Vegetables goes by what's called lekita, which is when you pick it. So whenever I pick the vegetables, whatever year it's in, I know that it belongs to that year of the cycle of Trumot and Masrot. When it comes to fruits, however, it's far more complicated, because fruit goes by what's called chanata. We have at least a 3-way machloket in the Rishonim, precisely what chanata means, but it probably refers to some form of ripening on the tree. So chanata can take place many months before before you actually pick the fruits. So I might be sitting in the 3rd year of the cycle and think, it's the year of Maser Ani and I have my fruit. But wait a minute, this fruit reached the stage of Chanata in the 2nd year, and therefore I would need to take Maser Sheni. That's why when it comes to Shemitah, already from the first day of Shemitah, the cucumbers that you buy and the tomatoes that you buy and the vegetables, you say have got Kedushat Shvit. But it's only a few months later, and when you get to the end of the Shemitah year, your vegetables, right, in the 8th year are going to be vegetables from the 8th year. But fruits, already going through the 8th year, you still have fruits that have Kedushat Shvit because it goes by the Chanata. So that's something a person actually has to be aware of when you separate Trumot and Masrot. But in any event, so the Maser Sheni has a special din. Maser Sheni has to be brought to Yerushalayim ben Achomot, and has to be eaten biktusha. Alternatively, you can do what's called pidyon. You can redeem the sanctity of the fruits onto a coin, onto money, and then you can eat those fruits wherever you want. They become chulin, but the money itself has to be brought to Yerushalayim. Okay, and we've discussed this in the past in different contexts. But the point is, the money of Maser Sheni has got special sanctity, and that has to be treated differently to the money which is chulin. So our case over here is like this. We said to Tanya, niach maneh umatzah matayim. So you had 100. You had a monetary amount of Maser Sheni, which was 100 shekels, let's say. And then you left it in a box, in a wallet, wherever it is. You come the next day and you open it up and you find there's now 200. Okay, so what's the din? Do we say this is what do we say? So first opinion, Rabbi says, okay, you had 100 of Maser Sheni. There's now 200. So says Rabbi, I assume you've got 100 which is Maser Sheni and 100 which is chulin. It was added to it. It's mixed in together. That is the opinion of Rabbi. The Chachamim on the other hand say what? They say Hakol chulin. They say no. Everything is chulin. You had 100 of Maser Sheni. Now there's 200. So this is not the original 100, but this is something else. The alternative case is hiniach matayim umatzah maneh. Okay, this is the case which really concerns us, and this is the parallel to the case of the birds. You left behind, there was 200. So in your box, in your wallet, you had 200 coins, which were Maser Sheni. You come back the next day, umatzah maneh, and now you find there's only 100. So what do we say? So two ways we could look at it. You could say, maneh munach, umaneh mutal, divrei Rabbi. Says Rabbi, okay, I had 200, there's now 100, so 100 was taken, and 100 is left, but that 100 is theirs from the original 200, so that still retains the din of Maser Sheni. V'chachamim omrim akol chulin. Chachamim say, no, everything's chulin. It's not the same as it was before. There was 200 before, the 200 is gone. And this is a separate 100. So what we see from this is that that's exactly parallel to our case. There were 3 birds. There are now 2 birds. According to Chachamim, the 3 birds have gone. 2 different birds have come. Right? You had 200 of Maser Sheni. The 200's gone. And different 100s come, which is chulin. That's a Chachamim. However, he said, but our Mishnah didn't paskin like that. Our Mishnah said we had 3 birds, we now have 2 birds. Those are 2 of the original 3. 1 is gone and 2 are left. That's exactly what Rabbi said. You had 200, there's now 100, 100's gone, but 100's left. It's part of the original Maser Sheni. So at this point, that's what the Gemara says. It would seem to be the simple reading is that our Mishnah follows the opinion of Rabbi. It does not follow the opinion of Rabbanan. Of course, it's never that simple. So tomorrow we will we'll see where the Gemara takes us from here. Okay. Everybody have a wonderful.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Very nice. Yeah.
Everybody tomorrow, God willing. All right.